Is that you, Dr. Creger?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Uh-oh. Now, Mr. Selden, would you call your witness to make sure that she can hear?
Do you wish me to step out?
Either way.
Might be better. I will return in a moment.
If you'll bear with us for a minute, Dr. Creger.
Certainly.
No,
Members of the jury, we have had some difficulty blowing up the video screen. It's kind of small, but I think you can still see the witness, and we may just have to go along with what we have.
Speaker, mic.
She was unable to contact the link.
Your Honor, she did hook up with Teams initially. She had audio, and then it disappeared. So she can see what's going on, but she can't hear, which is the most important thing.
Okay. Yes, Dr. Creger.
I can unmute myself. I muted myself, that section of the attorney. If you prefer me to stay unmuted, that's fine, and I can hang up from the telephone, whatever you prefer.
I think we need the telephone because we have problems with the audio.
She's calling now, Your Honor.
Okay, so, yeah.
She had, our expert can hear, she can hear when she is unmuted.
Okay. So if you'll stay unmuted, Dr. Creger, we'll be good as gold.
Maybe.
Fine. Is this working for you?
It's working great.
Great.
All right, if you'd please stand, Dr. Creger, and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. All right, Mr. Truman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you state and spell your name, please?
Diane Creger, D-I-A-N-E, K-R-I-E-G-E-R.
Thank you. Doctor, are you currently employed?
I am.
And what is your occupation?
I'm a physician and endocrinologist with Endocrinology Associates in Miami, Florida, and I am an associate professor of medicine and head of endocrinology at the Florida International University College of Medicine.
Your Honor, I hate to interrupt, but our expert cannot hear her at all now. I don't know what's going on.
All right.
Okay. Let me do something.
Stand by.
Can you hear me through the telephone?
Can you hear the telephone?
Can you hear me through the telephone?
We're checking.
Can you hear her now?
Okay. Because I originally was muted, then I unmuted to see if that would help you. And now I need to figure out how to mute again.
Okay, try.
Okay. Now our expert can hear her now.
Okay. We should be good now. But we can't hear Dr. Creger.
Aren't we all glad we live in this modern era?
We can't hear you at all, Dr. Creger.
Judge, the way we did it last week was we muted the team's microphones and broadcast through the telephone.
Yes, that's what we're trying to do now. Dr. Creger is on her phone.
I think we're gonna have to call this caller in.
She's making hand signals. Can you hear me, Dr. Creger? Okay. That's a start.
I agree.
She's trying to dial something.
Dr. Creger, you can answer that. It is us calling you back.
Your call has been forwarded. 3059030.
Okay. And she should answer.
Yes.
Answer that if you can. I'll just send us a note. What does that say, Mr.
Trying to
Truman?
reconnect.
She's trying to reconnect with the number that called her.
We'll call her.
Okay. We're calling you, Dr. Creger.
Hello?
Ah, that's promising.
Yes, sorry about that.
No problem, not your fault. Now, Mr. Selden, can you check to see if
Yes, Your
your
Honor.
expert can hear?
I can hear.
Okay.
Now my call is being forwarded to voicemail.
Okay. Well, why don't we start, and hopefully your expert will let us know. She'll call if she can't hear.
Let me send her a text message real quick. Perhaps
All right.
that
I
will do
can
it.
hear.
Oh, okay, we have another expert on the line. That's what's causing us our problems, Dr. Creger. The defense expert wants to be able to hear your testimony.
She just called me. She can't hear.
Why don't we just connect? That phone is a conference call phone. Just call the defense expert on that and add her to that call.
Okay. If someone knows how to do that, we can
Well,
do it.
maybe. Don't put me under that kind of pressure.
They're going to try another mode.
There's an ad
Why don't you just stay on the phone for a moment? Your Honor, I'm having her just stand by on my phone till we
Okay.
straighten it out.
Stanley, come up here with your number, please.
Dr. Banerjee, just mute your phone, and we should be going forward now. You can hear okay.
Thank you.
Correct?
Yes, I can. I'm muting.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Creger, are you still with us?
I am.
Outstanding. How many lawyers does it take to get a phone call?
I can tell you I've been doing telehealth for 5 years, and this happens in my life every day.
Well, doctors, through our Supreme Court, we have 1995 technology, so welcome to West Virginia. Doctor, before you stopped, you were mentioning endocrinology. Could you explain to us what that is, please?
Yes, endocrinology is a subspecialty of internal medicine that deals with the function of all the glands in the body, such as the pancreas, which makes insulin, and the thyroid, which makes thyroid hormone, the pituitary, that makes a lot of hormones that direct the other hormones, the ovaries and the testes. So we specialize in problems that happen in glands.
Now, Doctor, to get to this point, what kind of training did you have, please?
I have an undergraduate degree from Cornell University. From there, I went to the University of California, San Francisco, where I received a medical degree. From there, I crossed the country to Boston, where I went to the Beth Israel Hospital, a major teaching institution of Harvard Medical School. I did my internal medicine residency there, and then stayed on for a fellowship.
Doctor, could you tell us in summary fashion your work experience, please?
Yes. My first job was at the University of Miami Diabetes Research Institute, where I was an assistant clinical professor of medicine, taking care of patients, teaching medical students, and doing research. In 1991, I opened a private practice in Miami and have since then been practicing endocrinology in what started as a group with just me and now has 5 endocrinologists. And I then joined the faculty at a new medical school about 12 years ago, the Florida International University College of Medicine, where I am now head of endocrinology and associate professor of medicine. I teach second-year medical students the pathophysiology of endocrinology, and I teach the clinical studies of third-year medical school students and first-year residents.
Now, Doctor, have you published any peer-reviewed articles?
Yes. During the time of my private practice, I was also involved in a lot of clinical research and have published a number of articles about those topics, a variety of topics. I did research in diabetes, in natural products and their safety and effectiveness, and later in my career, I did a lot of vaccine research and had a number of publications having to do with that.
Have you been a presenter for any national or international conferences?
Yes, in 2021, I came to Morgantown, West Virginia, where I presented at a symposium. I was the endocrine expert for the Clarksburg Johnson VA insulin murder cases, and the prosecutors and I and several of the other physicians created a symposium jointly with the medical school and the law school about the cases.
Doctor, the term board certified comes up when experts are involved. What does that mean?
That means that you have the physician has achieved a certain level of training and then has demonstrated competency by taking examinations. So I am board certified in internal medicine and in endocrinology, diabetes, and metabolism.
You are licensed to practice medicine, I take it, in various jurisdictions?
Yes, I'm licensed to practice medicine in the state of Florida and in the state of Utah.
You alluded to it earlier, but what high-profile cases have you been involved in?
Yes, I've been involved in 2 serial murder cases involving insulin. The first was at the Johnson VA in Clarksburg, West Virginia, and the second was in Butler, Pennsylvania, where I was an expert for the Office of the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Your Honor, under Rule 702, subject to inquiry by the defense, the state would move this witness be treated as an expert.
All right, Mr. Selden, do you wish to engage in voir dire of the proposed expert witness?
No, Your Honor, we accept her as an expert.
Very well. Dr. Creger will be accepted by the court as an expert in her field.
Doctor, at the state's request, you reviewed some medical records and you drafted a report of your opinions and findings. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You wrote one report dated April 13th, 2023, and it's 7 pages long. Is that right?
That is correct.
Since drafting that report, have you had anything brought to your attention that would cause you to make changes or amendments to your report?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, state moves State 718 into evidence.
All right. Have you seen that, Mr. Selden?
I have, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
State's number 18 will be admitted into evidence.
Doctor, in preparation for your report, what records did you review?
I have a list of those records. Would you like me to read them?
I think that might be helpful, please.
I have records from the Charleston Area Medical Center, from Orthopedic and Spine Surgery Associates, the records of Dr. R. Patel, the records of the Raleigh General Hospital, West Virginia Controlled Substance Drug Log, Bureau of Criminal Investigation, Lieutenant T.C. Bledsoe, interview of Stephanie Hamilton, STD tool mark worksheet, and an autopsy report.
And that the autopsy report was from the State Medical Examiner's Office in West Virginia, is that correct?
That is correct.
Doctor, what's the cause of death of Michael Cochran, according to your review of the records?
Well, I'm not a cause of death expert since I'm an endocrinologist. My expertise is in hypoglycemia, but it appears that his death was related to hypoglycemia, which then produced cerebral edema.
And that's what I'd ask you, if you feel competent to do so. Can you explain what cerebral edema is?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I didn't hear you well.
Sure. Can you explain to us what cerebral edema is?
Certainly. Cerebral edema is swelling of the brain cells, and that is usually caused by either not enough blood sugar going to the brain cells or not enough oxygen going to the brain cells.
In your report, you indicate a number of, well, for lack of a better word, pieces of information or tests that could have been performed at one point or another that would have helped you be more definitive in your assessment of the case. Could you explain to me what you meant by that?
Yes. When a person presents with a very low blood sugar, which we call hypoglycemia, there are very specific tests that should be done prior to the treatment of the low blood sugar. There are a list of tests. I can tell you each one specifically if you'd like.
Please.
But unfortunately, you would like me to? Okay. We do an insulin level, a C-peptide level, a pro-insulin level, a beta-hydroxybutyrate, a glycinide sulfonylurea screen. And those tests help us determine whether the low blood sugar was related to insulin or not, and where the insulin could have come from. The test needs to be done prior to the treatment of the low blood sugar.
In this case,
Unfortunately, in this case, the tests were not performed. I can tell you that I've reviewed many cases, as I told you of my prior experience, and it is close to zero in any of those cases that the tests were performed. And it's unfortunate because it really helps make a determination about the cause of the low blood sugar.
Okay, so there was a limit, as the state understands your testimony, doctor, there was a limited time during which those tests that you mentioned could have been performed that would have helped definitively determine the insulin issue.
That's right. The test should have been performed on arrival at the emergency room when the other blood tests were performed, or as soon as it became evident that the blood sugar was extremely low.
And what's the impact of treatment? Had the treatment taken place and then those tests performed, what would have been the relationship between those two factors?
What happens is the treatment of low blood sugar is glucose or sugar. And when sugar is administered, it changes the results of some of the blood tests that we draw and makes them unhelpful.
Okay, so those tests were not performed. So what alternative means is there to determine the outcome or the impact of insulin or lack thereof?
In my prior experience with the other cases, and again in this case, the only thing left to do is to go through all the possible causes of low blood sugar and determine if they are credible or possible in this case.
And how many of them would there be?
There are many. I listed, I believe, 13. I left some possible causes out because they don't apply in adults, or because it was very clear from the history of this particular person that the causes would not apply, and I listed 13 causes.
Let's talk about those 13 causes, doctor. Let's go through them, please, and your process of discussing them and ruling them in or out as a potential cause.
Of course. Okay. So the first one I've listed, and it's in no particular order, but I'll just go through the way I listed them 2 years ago. That many patients who have diabetes are treated with medications that cause low blood sugar, and that's what we see most often. But the person we're talking about now did not have diabetes and was not taking any of those meds. End-stage liver failure, we call it hepatic failure, can cause low blood sugar because the liver is a good source of sugar for the body when someone isn't eating. And our patient here did not have any liver problems that would be considered end-stage liver problems. He had a minor abnormality of a couple of tests over many years that were not affecting him. End-stage kidney failure can cause a low blood sugar because the kidney makes blood sugar, oddly enough, and helps control blood sugar when people need it. And his kidney function was excellent. A very severe systemic infection, that means an infection that spreads from where it started into the bloodstream, can cause a low blood sugar, and we have no evidence of that. He didn't have a fever at the time that someone checked his his temperature at home, and he didn't have low blood pressure, which is associated with widely disseminated severe infection. He did receive an antibiotic prior to the test we do to check for systemic infection, but he received only one dose, and that dose would not likely have been enough to make that blood test negative, and it was negative when it was done at the next hospital. Very, very, very severe malnutrition can cause, rarely, but can cause a low blood sugar. But this gentleman was not malnourished. He had a normal body weight. And in fact, he was interested in bodybuilding and was muscular. So that would not apply. Excess alcohol can cause it in a certain particular circumstance. It can cause it when someone drinks a lot of alcohol and then doesn't eat. That has to do with how alcohol works in the liver, that it suppresses one way of making sugar but not the other. So if someone drinks a lot and doesn't eat for a few days, we can see low blood sugar. And we don't have evidence of that. We don't have a history of alcohol use. His alcohol level was undetectable, and that's not an issue. An insufficiency of the adrenal gland can cause low blood sugar, rarely in adults, mainly in children, but it can. And we don't have any evidence that this person had a problem with his adrenal. It was working very well. He was on a nasal steroid, which sometimes it's used in very high amounts, could possibly suppress his adrenal gland, but that wouldn't be operative in him. And those steroids are not strong enough to cause adrenal insufficiency. Sometimes medications unrelated to diabetes can cause low blood sugar, but there are very, very few that are really believable. I made a list of the medicines he said he was taking. One of those on the list, I subsequently learned, was not what he was taking. He thought he was taking something called enclomiphene, which people may have heard of as a fertility drug. Sometimes it's used in males to help increase testosterone. He thought he was taking that, but he was actually taking letrozole, which is a medicine that is used in breast cancer patients to stop male hormones from converting to female hormones, and downstream that tells the body to make more testosterone. So that doesn't have an effect on blood sugar. He was maybe taking a seizure medicine. It's not clear if he was taking it because that's not associated with blood sugar problems. He was taking pseudoephedrine. If anything, pseudoephedrine would raise the blood sugar, but it doesn't cause low blood sugar. I was taking an asthma medication and some inhaled antihistamine, and again, those do not cause low blood sugar. A malignancy is another cause. Malignancy, that means cancer, is another cause of low blood sugar when it's widely spread and very end stage, and it's not very common, and we had no evidence of that in this healthy young man. There is a tumor of the pancreas. It's called an insulin-oma. Oma means tumor, making insulin. And those are rare. I've seen a number of them. They tend to present over time. Someone has complaints over months to years when the blood sugar is found to be low. And they're relatively easy to treat. They don't they're not what we call refractory, meaning hard to treat, where you have to give a lot of sugar to bring the sugar up. So it would be very, very unlikely that he would have had an insulinoma. The next item, number 11, is a very, very rare situation where there's no insulinoma, but the body acts like there is one. And we see this most often in people who have had gastric bypass surgery. And he did not. So that would be highly unlikely. Finally, or not finally, near finally, there is what we call the factitious use of medications that cause low blood sugar, where someone takes them, call for attention, call for help. We don't know why that happens. And they're pills. Those pills rarely, some of them are very weak and don't cause low blood sugar. Some of them are stronger and can cause low blood sugar, but they don't cause a low potassium, which we'll talk about later. And our patient here had a low potassium. Finally, antibodies to insulin can cause a low blood sugar. It's been rarely reported in Caucasians. It's mainly reported in Asian countries and in patients with autoimmune problems. And our patient here did not have autoimmune problems. There was a small amount, or we don't know how much, the urine screen for benzodiazepines, which is a tranquilizer, was found in his urine. Usually when that's found, we need to have a blood test to follow up on how much and what it could be, but that wasn't done. There have been some reports of low blood sugar with that medicine. I looked at them carefully. There was a paper from Iran that said that people who came in with overdose of benzodiazepines had lower sugar than those who had other reasons for symptoms. And interestingly, in that paper, they didn't tell us what the blood sugar was. They didn't say how low the blood sugar was. Another paper by those same authors reporting something similar showed blood sugars in the 80s. And we generally define low blood sugar as less than 55. So I'm not sure if that information is quite believable, and it's not in the mainstream of the list of medicines that cause low blood sugar. Some antibiotics we know can cause low blood sugar. He did not receive any of those that we're aware of.
Doctor, you indicated you had the records from Raleigh General Hospital from his admission on February 6th of 2019. Did you see in there the blood glucose level that Raleigh General's testing detected?
Yes.
What was it?
21.
21. What's the clinical significance of a 21 blood glucose level?
I would call that a profoundly low blood sugar. Very, very low, which we rarely see. And it's at the magnitude that we were seeing in the cases that I reviewed in the other two series that I told you about, where it's extremely low. I would say that, for me, it's a big call to attention. What is this about? Why is this sugar so low?
But as you've already indicated, even though that calls your attention to it, it did not at Raleigh General Hospital, and none of the testing that you've suggested was performed.
That's correct.
What is the impact on blood glucose of skipping meals?
I'm sorry, I lost the last part of your question.
What is the impact on blood glucose of skipping meals?
A normal person will not have a low blood sugar if he or she skips a meal. The only time that would happen in a normal person is maybe someone treated with insulin for diabetes or with another medication that causes insulin to be produced for diabetes, and then they don't eat. Yes, we can see a low blood sugar, but a non-diabetic person who doesn't eat will have a normal liver response and produce enough sugar to keep the sugar in the normal range. Our bodies are designed to maintain normal blood sugar, and skipping a meal will not cause a low blood sugar in a normal person.
What's the impact of alcohol abuse on blood glucose?
As I said earlier, when someone has a big binge of alcohol and then doesn't eat, that combination is required to cause low blood sugar. If you have an alcohol binge and eat, it's not going to happen.
Now, you mentioned that you found significance in the potassium level of Mr. Cochran at Raleigh General Hospital. Can you expand on that, please?
Yes. There are very few causes of low potassium. Let's go through them. If someone has severe diarrhea, they can lose potassium. If someone has very significant vomiting, copious, tons of vomiting over and over and over for a long period of time, they can lose potassium. If someone is taking a diuretic that wastes potassium in the urine, they can have a low potassium. If someone has too much cortisol production over a long period of time by a tumor in either the adrenal or the pituitary, they could have low potassium. Or really more the adrenal, not the pituitary. But another cause of low potassium is a high dose of insulin. In fact, for years we were treating high potassium with a combination of insulin and sugar. The reason is insulin drives sugar into the cell, and at the same time, it drives potassium into the cell. So it takes it out of the bloodstream and makes the potassium low. And as I told you, I had reviewed a lot of cases of insulin, people who had received high doses of insulin in West Virginia and in Pennsylvania, and a good number of them also had low potassium for no other reason that we could determine.
Doctor, you also mentioned at Raleigh General there was a detection of benzodiazepine in Mr. Cochran's body. How did Raleigh General determine that?
They did a urine screen, which is the first step, and is usually followed by a blood test, but that was not performed.
In this case, did the urine screen tell you the amount of the benzodiazepines in Mr. Cochran's system?
No, it doesn't tell us the amount, and it doesn't even tell us when he might have taken it.
Can you expand on that,
Days
please?
before.
I'm sorry?
The urine screen could be positive for a number of days after someone's taken a benzodiazepine.
Okay. And, Doctor, what is the impact of taking insulin if you're a non-diabetic and a basically healthy person and they receive insulin? What's the impact of that?
A healthy person who receives insulin, certainly at a significant amount, will have a low blood sugar reaction because their own pancreas makes enough insulin that they don't need it, and it will drive the sugar down.
Is there any way to tell in retrospect how much insulin it would have taken for Michael Cochran's blood glucose level to be at 21?
No, but it was likely a fair amount, enough to drive the potassium down and to lower the sugar to that very, very low level. The kind of studies that are done about how insulin works and how much is needed are done in first normal volunteers to see what the time course of action is of the insulin. And those patients are given the insulin, and they're also given sugar back so they don't get sick from low blood sugar. And in patients with diabetes, we give a variety of doses depending on their needs. So we don't really have data. No one is experimenting with giving very large doses of insulin to normal people because they don't need it. And there's not a reason for us to know about that.
The result of a blood glucose level of 21 at Raleigh General Hospital, would that be the expected result if Mr. Cochran had been given insulin that day?
Yes.
Your Honor, that's all the questions the state has. Thank you.
All right, cross-examination, Mr. Selden.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Creger. I'm Stanley Selden. I'm co-counsel for Natalie Cochran.
Good morning.
Good morning. First of all, how did you learn of this case, and who hired you?
I received a call sometime in 2022, probably, from Mr. Hatfield.
Who was the prosecuting attorney at that time, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Did Mr. Hatfield hire you on behalf of the prosecutor's office and the state of West Virginia?
Yes.
Okay. And they are paying your fee, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Just a few preliminary questions. Why does the body need blood sugar?
We need blood sugar to fuel our cells to do all the work of staying alive. The brain needs blood sugar to work. The muscles need it. It's the engine of life.
And how does blood sugar work in the body?
What do you mean?
What's the source of blood sugar in the body, and how does it affect the body? How does it work in the body?
Food is the source of blood sugar, but it is also a deposit of substances in the liver and the muscles to keep the blood sugar normal when we're not eating. After all, people sleep for 8 or 10 hours. They might not eat for 12 hours, yet the blood sugar is maintained.
Excuse me, doctor. I asked you, just a moment, Dr. Creger. I asked, how does sugar work in the body?
It fuels the metabolism.
What is hypoglycemia?
Hypoglycemia means low blood sugar, usually defined as less than 55.
And how do you come up with that figure? Because the information I have is that in a 38-year-old male like Michael Cochran, low blood sugar is defined as less than 70 milligrams per deciliter, not 55.
Well, like in many definitions, there are all sorts of sources that you might read, but the conventional level that I'm aware of from my reading and teaching is 55. 70 is what might refer to below 70. Some of the hormones might change in response to what the body might think is a falling blood sugar, but 70 is not defined as low blood sugar.
Is there any specific number or measure of blood sugar in a 38-year-old male Caucasian? What's the range of, quote, normal, unquote?
Well, that changes over time. You know, these types of things are not fixed. Usually 80 to 100. Diabetes begins at 125, and pre-diabetes begins at 100. These are fasting levels.
Okay, so
Levels will go up after meals.
all right. So from that answer, you said 80 and up, and then you talked about diabetes. So 70 actually would be low blood sugar level in a 38-year-old male, Caucasian, correct?
No,
It's not,
correct.
okay. It's not within the normal limits that you just said. You said 80 to an upper number of 100, 120, something like that. Right?
But 70 is not considered hypoglycemia.
All right.
Or low. I look at hundreds of laboratory reports a week, and I would not pay attention to 70 in a healthy person.
All right. Let me move on. It's been suggested or alleged that Michael Cochran, on February 6th of 2019, got an injection of insulin on that day. Now, they're referencing a specific type of insulin, Humalog Lispro insulin. That is what we call a fast-acting type of insulin. Isn't that correct?
Humalog or Lispro is a fast-acting insulin.
Right.
Yes.
And if an injection of Lispro Humalog insulin is injected in a person, it takes approximately 15 minutes for it to start to work. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
So if someone was injected with this specific type of insulin, they wouldn't just drop to the ground unconscious immediately. It would take some time for it to act. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Now, this particular type of insulin works over a specified period of time. And that time period, when it's active or working in the body, is approximately 3 to 4 hours. Isn't that correct?
Well, that varies.
Is that not a
That
good...
depends.
Let me clarify. It works for, at most, 4 to 5 hours in the body. Isn't that correct? Under normal circumstances.
Under normal circumstances, but at high doses, it could last considerably longer.
What do you consider a high dose? Let me clarify that. If a 10 milliliter bottle of insulin was injected into a normal person, approximately how long would it be active in the body?
Well, that's a huge amount of insulin, and we can't know how long it would be active, but we do know that massive doses and very high doses last a lot longer than conventional doses.
But you don't know how long that lasts, right?
No one knows because no one would study that. It's not done in healthy people, and wouldn't need to know that. So there's no information about that. But we do know that higher doses last longer.
Is there any definitive information that says human Lispro insulin injected into the body works any longer than 7 hours, no matter what the dosage is?
We don't have that information,
Okay.
but we don't know how many doses he got, how many injections he got.
You've answered my question. Thank you. Now, I believe you said that you recognized that a urine toxicology test was done on Michael Cochran when he was admitted on February 6, 2019 to the hospital, and that test was positive for benzodiazepines. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And this urine toxicology test or report could not tell you the identity or the blood level of benzodiazepines. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And we don't know the source of those benzodiazepines. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Are you aware that benzodiazepines can cause low blood sugar and hypoglycemia?
That's been reported, but as I said earlier, the reports are vague. They don't list the blood sugar levels, and in one paper that reports it, the blood sugar is listed in the 80s as average. So that is not clearly, it has not been clearly established.
So are you saying that benzodiazepines in someone can't cause low blood sugar?
I'm saying that we don't have a lot of information supporting that, and the information we do have is quite weak, as it is with a lot of other medicines that have been linked with hypoglycemia.
All right, let me move on to another question. Are you aware that a drug overdose of benzodiazepines could cause what they call hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy with cerebral edema, which we'll call HIE?
No.
You're not aware that benzodiazepines can cause that condition, which includes cerebral edema?
No, I'm not.
Well, I would submit to you that HIE with cerebral edema is a condition that's essentially irreversible brain damage caused by a lack of oxygen to the brain with brain fluid on the brain, right? Isn't that the definition of HIE with edema?
I can't comment since it's not a condition I'm familiar with, and I'm not a neurologist or expert in that topic.
So you don't know, correct?
Yes.
Is hypoglycemia the only cause for cerebral edema? Because you talk about cerebral edema in your testimony previously.
No, it is not.
Okay. Isn't it true that other causes of cerebral edema include drug overdose, brain cancer, tumors, high altitude carbon monoxide poisoning, trauma, systemic infection, encephalitis, and hepatic encephalopathy.
That sounds like a reasonable list, none
Okay.
of which we know he has.
I didn't ask you that. You don't know if he had a drug overdose or not, correct?
Yes.
Wouldn't this cerebral edema, and again, that's fluid on the brain, from these other causes appear the same on a CT scan?
Yes. The brain tumor might not appear the same, because that would be localized.
Okay, but these other causes,
Where is the tumor?
these other causes could appear on a CT scan, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And that CT scan shows brain damage. That's the reason to do a CT scan, right?
The reason to do the CT scan in his case was that he had an altered consciousness.
And altered consciousness could mean he had damage to his brain, right?
Yes.
Okay. And a CT scan doesn't tell you the cause of cerebral edema, correct?
Yes.
So to sum up these questions, Michael Cochran's cerebral edema, which was diagnosed, and might be the cause of his brain problems and ultimate brain death, isn't solely caused by hypoglycemia. Isn't that correct?
Well, you're asking me about Michael Cochran. I think the question I can answer is hypoglycemia is not the only cause of cerebral edema.
Okay, that's sufficient. You comment in your report that there were no other abnormalities to cause Michael Cochran's hypoglycemia. Did you not see Michael Cochran's extremely elevated white blood cell count, which was above 17,000?
I did see that,
Okay,
and that can be
that's all I asked you. And for the jury's information, white blood cells in the body fight infections and toxins and things of that sort. Isn't that correct? That's one of their functions.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and they can be raised by a number of things, not
Okay.
only
And that wasn't my question. My question was, one of their function is to fight infection. And you answered that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see the report in the emergency room that included infection for which he was given intravenous antibiotics?
He received one dose of an intravenous antibiotics because they were
Okay,
worried
now,
about
I just
aspiration
asked
pneumonia.
I just asked you if you saw the report that says he was given intravenous antibiotics, and your answer is yes. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, an infection in the body can cause low blood sugar levels as well as insulin. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Just a moment, Your Honor. I want to review my notes very quickly.
All right.
Michael Cochran was admitted to the hospital on February 6th of 2019, and he received treatment at Raleigh General and CAMC in Charleston for approximately 5 days when he was discharged on February 11th of 2019 to hospice care. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And during that whole time, with doctors treating him, doing various tests, going through everything to try and figure out what his problems were, there was no suspicion of insulin in his body, and they didn't do any testing to definitively decide that. Isn't that correct?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. All right, now I want to discuss Michael Cochran's glucose or blood level or blood sugar levels from the time he was admitted on February 6th of 2019 at approximately 12 noon. And I have an exhibit, which I would like marked as defendant's next numbered exhibit.
He was not admitted at 12 noon, just to be correct.
I didn't say 12 noon, I just said he was admitted. Okay?
This is defendant's exhibit number 10, Your Honor.
Thank you.
And I have previously given a copy to
All right.
I'd like to put it on this viewer if possible, and I'm not real adept at that, so I could use some assistance.
All right. I'll ask the bailiff to assist. We may not be able to do that, Mr. Selden, because I think we're using that device to project Dr. Creger.
Is there any way I can project this onto the screen so the jury can see it?
We'll have to do it the old-fashioned way. We'll have to pass it from one juror to another.
Why can't we just slide this aside and use the viewer?
We can try. See what happens.
Because I'm going to be referring to specifics in this, and passing it from one jury to the other would probably take forever.
All right.
Set it here. Your Honor, there was a suggestion by my co-counsel that perhaps we could take a break, make multiple copies of this to distribute to the jury so they can refer to it.
All right. That sounds like a plan. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a good time for us to take our break. You may be getting tired of donuts at this juncture. You've eaten a lot of them, and the leftovers I usually eat, so it's bad whenever you leave a whole bunch of them. If you would like to have a different type of treat, tell the bailiff, and we will accommodate. We want your experience to be meaningful, and we will treat you like veritable kings and queens. We will try to accommodate your wishes. Please do not discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else, and we'll break for 10 or 15 minutes, and hopefully we'll have the technology straightened out by the time you come back. You may go with the bailiff to your jury room. Okay, you can be seated, Doctor. You're still with us?
I am.
Did you receive an email copy of a document?
I did, and I printed it out.
All right, good deal. Are there any matters that we need to take up at this time out of the presence of the jury?
Only one, Judge.
Go ahead.
Dr. Kubicek will be on for a Teams meeting at 1:30 this afternoon in terms of plotting strategy.
Okay. Do you happen to have a witness in the meantime?
We do.
Okay, good. Anything from the defense?
No,
Mr.
Your
Sir.
Honor.
Bring in the jury, please, bailiff. All right, members of the jury, you will see that you have a document in your seat. That is the document that has been marked as Defendant's Exhibit Number 10. We will presumably find out more about that matter shortly, and you can follow along in terms of the testimony. Please continue, Mr. Selden.
Thank you, Your Honor. Before we get to Defendant's Exhibit Number 10, I'd like the jury just to set that aside for a moment. I have a couple of questions before we get into it.
Go ahead.
Now, Dr. Creger, it's been alleged that Michael Cochran took a variety of supplements, substances, or other undeclared medications. And because they've been undeclared, you don't have any idea what he was taking or what effect it had on his body. Wouldn't that be a fair question?
Yes.
Okay. You said that you reviewed one autopsy report. Was that right?
Yes. Prior to my writing of my 2023 report, yes.
Okay. Was that Dr. Kubicek's report? He's the medical examiner for West Virginia. Is that the report you reviewed? Yes.
Yes.
Did you note in his conclusions that he said the cause of death and the manner of death was undetermined? Did you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Now I'd like to turn to Defendant's Exhibit Number 10, which the jury has copies of. And you have a copy of that as well, Dr. Creger. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at the top, it says, with a double asterisk, alleged event is approximately 12 p.m. on February 6, 2019. What that is referring to is that there's an approximation of what time Natalie Cochran, if at any time she injected Michael Cochran with insulin. That's all that means. And we don't have an exact time. It just says approximate time, 12 p.m. Do you note that at the top?
I see that.
Okay. Because there is no actual witness to Natalie Cochran injecting Michael Cochran on February the 6th of 2019 with anything. We don't have a witness who's going to state that. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, also at the top, there is a note that says hypoglycemia is sugar, meaning blood sugar, less than 70 milligrams per deciliter in a person without diabetes. That's up for debate. You said under 55, I believe. Is that right?
That's right. The reason I said that is that when you testing...
I don't need you to go into any detail. I'm just clarifying what your statement was. Okay? Thank you. Now, this is a chart that has the date and time of testing for blood glucose in Michael Cochran. First column is the date and the time, and unfortunately it's military time, but I'll go through that. The second column is the blood glucose level. The third column is the hours since the alleged event. Again, the alleged event is suspected injection of Michael Cochran with insulin. And the fourth column is, it says, was Lispro active in his body? Lispro is the Humalog insulin alleged to be the subject of all of this controversy. Okay? Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. And I hope it's clear to the jury. I'll move on. The first entry is February 6th, 2019, the date when Michael Cochran was first admitted to the hospital. And it says 2020, which is 8:20 p.m. Do you note that?
Yes.
Okay. The second column says that his blood glucose level was 21. Now, you've made a lot of comments about that. That's extremely low by anybody's calculation, right?
Yes.
Okay. The third column says that the time frame of the taking of that level is 8 hours and 20 minutes after the time Michael was supposed to be injected. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay? Is it your testimony that the insulin, Humalog, Lispro, insulin, alleged in the case, could still be active in Michael's body 8 hours and 20 minutes after alleged injection?
It's possible if a very high dose was used or if additional doses were given.
I'm talking about a singular injection of Humalog insulin. Would a singular injection, no matter the quantity, the volume, still be active and causing effects in Michael Cochran's body 8 hours and 20 minutes after injection?
The quantity and volume does matter.
Is it your testimony that the Humalog insulin could still be active in Michael Cochran's body 8 hours and 20 minutes later? Irregardless of the volume, I'm talking about a single injection. Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. Second column. It's dated February 7th, 2019. That's the next day after Michael's in the hospital. It's 23, which is 12:23 a.m. The blood glucose level isn't available. The third column says 12 hours and 23 minutes after alleged injection of a single dose. Is it your testimony that Lispro Humalog insulin can still be active in Michael Cochran's body?
Well, there's no additional hypoglycemia except a finger stick further down in the list. So
I'm just asking you, is it your testimony? And I don't care about the blood glucose level. I'm asking, can this type of insulin still be active in Michael Cochran's body 12 hours and 23 minutes later?
It's unlikely.
Okay. So the subsequent tests, well, let me go on. February 7th, 2019, 12:28 a.m. We don't know the blood glucose level. It's now 12 hours and 28 minutes. Is it still your testimony that the insulin is unlikely to be active in Michael's body at this time?
If only one injection were given at that time, yes.
Okay. Now, the next entry is February 7th of 2019. It's 12:33 a.m. Now, Michael's blood glucose is on the rise. It's going up. It's all the way up to 63, 12 hours and 33 minutes later. Now, isn't it true that if there was a single injection and given this level, the insulin's no longer active?
It's likely that it's not if it's a single injection and
Okay.
the blood sugar is not low.
That's all I asked you. Next entry, February 7th, 1:55 a.m. Blood glucose is on the rise. It's all the way up to 80, 13 hours and 55 minutes. The Lispro insulin's not active anymore, right?
Correct.
Okay. February 7th, 2:17 a.m. Now his blood glucose is all the way up to 187, 14 hours and 17 minutes later. Lispro insulin, not active, cannot cause that reaction, correct?
Well, high blood sugar would be caused by insulin anyway, but yes.
Yeah. And we don't know what time. They're doing things to try and raise Michael Cochran's glucose level. They gave him an injection of dextrose D50 at the emergency room. That is an attempt to raise his blood glucose levels, correct?
Yes.
Right. And it's taking effect. It's working. His blood glucose levels are going up, right?
Yes.
Okay. February 7th, 5:13 a.m. His blood glucose now drops all the way down to 44. 17 hours and 13 minutes later. How do you account for that?
Well, that one is could be an outlier because that one was done by finger stick, not by blood, by finger prick. And per my review of the records, I didn't see that anything was done in response to that. And then the next one, shortly
What?
thereafter.
I just asked you your
She's trying to answer
explanation.
the question, Mr. Selden. Let her go ahead.
Okay.
You may continue, Ms. Creger, Dr. Creger.
Thank you. What I was saying is that the finger stick at 44, according to my review of the record, did not receive any action. So there was nothing given in response to that. And a short time later, the sugar was normal again. So I don't really know if that has much meaning.
Okay. But you can say, since it's 17 hours and 13 minutes after the alleged injection of insulin, that insulin is not working in Michael's body at this time. Correct?
His own insulin is likely working, but an injection given at noon would not likely be working.
Okay, I'm just asking about the single injection given at noon on February 6th. That's all these questions are directed at, okay?
Yes.
All right. At 6:22 a.m. on February 7th, his insulin's on the rise again. It's up to 95, and that's within normal range according to your testimony. Isn't that right?
Yes, it's not insulin, glucose. But
Glucose, sorry. Okay. 18 hours, 27 minutes later, insulin not active in his body. Correct?
yes, and that's from a noon injection.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, I'm not going to go through the other entries. And I'm sure the jury appreciates that. But Michael's blood glucose levels are back on the rise, and now they're all the way up into at least normal range, and there's no activity or effect from a single injection of Humalog Lispro insulin alleged to have been given at approximately noon on February 6th. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I think we're done with that exhibit for now.
All right, I'll ask the bailiff to collect the copies. All right.
Now, in your review of all of the records and everything you reviewed in this case, it has been alleged that Michael Cochran was using undeclared supplements or substances or other medications, and because it's not clearly in the records, you wouldn't have any idea what he was taking or its effects on his body. Wouldn't that be a fair statement?
Yes.
You state in your report in the conclusions, in summary, that Michael Cochran's, quote, hypoglycemia due to insulin administration is a strong possibility. So from that statement, you cannot say that insulin was the one and only factor that caused Michael Cochran's hypoglycemia. Isn't that correct?
It's the only credible explanation since none of the other explanations work.
I didn't ask you if it was credible. I said you cannot say it's the one and only. You're only stating it's a strong possibility. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. To what degree of medical certainty is a strong possibility? What is that?
That's not quantified.
Okay. I believe that's all the questions I have at this time. Thank you.
All right, redirect Mr. Truman.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, this started off some time ago by asking who is paying you to be here today, and you responded that the state. Would the fact that the state's paying you cause you to alter your testimony or your opinions in any manner?
No.
Defendant's 10. Doctor, defendant's exhibit number 10, which was a document emailed to you while we were on a break, that's based on some assumptions that there was a single dose at noon. There is nothing in Stage 10 that would eliminate the possibility of multiple injections of insulin, is there?
Objection, Your Honor. That's not the facts and evidence.
Overruled.
You can answer, Doctor, please.
Yes. It's very likely that there was another injection or another type of insulin in addition or to the Lispro.
There was some discussion about benzodiazepines and Michael Cochran. Is there anything in the records that would cause you to believe that that would be responsible for his low blood glucose level?
No, and in fact, an allergy to a benzodiazepine was noted in his record. When we have a patient who has an allergy to one benzodiazepine, we caution them not to have others. So I don't know how to reconcile all of that, what the allergy was about, and whether he would have why he would have taken that medication.
One theory presented to you by the defense was that it might have, his blood glucose level may have dropped because of a drug overdose. Is there any evidence whatsoever that Michael Cochran overdosed on any drug other than insulin?
No.
There was also the matter of the high white blood count. And you started to address that issue and you were stopped. So let me give you the opportunity to explain the treatment and the end result of the high white blood count.
Yes. Well, it is true that we see a high white blood cell count with infection. It's not the only cause. When blood sugar goes extremely low, other hormones rise, and those hormones, particularly cortisol, will cause white blood cells to look high. We see this a lot in patients who have excess cortisol for other reasons, and that's a possible explanation. Since there was no evidence for infection, he didn't have a fever, he didn't have a low blood pressure. I'm talking about enormous infection that would cause a low blood sugar. Fever, no low blood pressure, no evidence of infection on exam, and a negative blood culture after the single dose of antibiotic that would not have tamed a rip-roaring infection bad enough to cause a low blood sugar.
How would you expect a non-diabetic person to physically react if they were given insulin? What kind of symptoms would you expect to see?
There's a a cascade of events that occur. As the sugar begins to drop, people feel sweaty, shaky, they can have pounding in their chest, palpitations we call it. We can have, people then can proceed to seizure, to coma, which is from the brain cell edema that we've talked about. So that's the cascade from hunger, shakiness, sweating, pounding in the chest, to seizure, coma.
You had indicated that 55 was the number you considered to be a low blood glucose. Can you expand on that a little bit, please?
Yes. In the testing we do when we are trying to figure out why someone has a low blood sugar, and we can't explain it yet, we use 55 as the cutoff, and we don't do the extra testing until the blood sugar is less than 55 when there are symptoms, less than 45 when there are no symptoms. So 55 is our cutoff for the testing.
Okay. When Michael Cochran went to Raleigh General and his blood glucose was measured at 21, and this may be out of your field, and if so, just say so, but had the damage already been done by that time?
Well, the brain edema had already started, yes.
That's all the questions the state has. Thank you.
Recross Mr. Selden.
Need to approach the bench.
All right. All right. Further questions, Mr. Selden?
Thank you, Your Honor. There has been testimony throughout this trial that Natalie Cochran allegedly injected Michael Cochran sometime around noon when he collapsed. Then there were people constantly checking. There were people constantly in and out of the house, numerous witnesses, people coming over, staying with Natalie, checking on Michael. So, and then Michael goes into the hospital at approximately 8 p.m. And he's in the hospital from February 6th of 2019 through and including February 10th or 11th when he goes to the hospice and passes away. When would there be an opportunity for Natalie Cochran to inject him multiple times given those facts?
Objection. That's beyond the scope of an endocrinologist's expertise.
Sustained.
From a scientific point, based on the records which note Michael's glucose levels, etc., when would additional injections occur to have the result of altering blood glucose levels, etc.? We went all through that chart of the extensive testing and recording of his blood glucose levels from approximately 8 p.m. on February 6th through his stay at the hospital. Scientific evidence, when would an injection of insulin have occurred to have those results?
You're asking me to speculate.
I'm not asking you to speculate. I'm asking you, given the scientific medical evidence of blood glucose levels February 6th through his stay, like every 15 minutes, every half hour, when would those scientific information show another injection of insulin?
Well, we really have to explain the 21, because the other one, there's only one low, and that's a finger stick that wasn't treated and normalized without treatment. So it's really explaining the 21.
Okay, and the 21 was recorded initially or stated initially by a supposed witness, Ms. Hamilton. She's the one that said it was 21 when Michael was admitted to the hospital approximately 8 p.m. Do you recall that?
Wait a minute.
No, that was the
Wait,
plumber.
objection.
Just wait a minute, Doctor. Go ahead, Mr.
That
Truman.
wasn't the testimony. That came from Raleigh General 21, not Stephanie Hamilton.
All right,
This is
that's
a
fine.
misleading question.
I'll withdraw it and I'll stand corrected.
Okay.
The 21 was when he was admitted to Raleigh General Hospital approximately 8 p.m. When would Natalie Cochran have an opportunity to inject him to cause that decrease in glucose?
Again, I would have to speculate, but sometime later in that afternoon.
All right. The prosecutor asked you on redirect about the white blood cell count. And the simple explanation of that is we don't know the cause of the extreme elevation of the white blood cells. Isn't that correct?
No, there are certainly hypotheses that can be rendered, including...
But we don't, just a moment, we don't actually know. There weren't any definitive tests that would account for the elevated white blood cell count. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Just a moment, Your Honor.
Very well.
I don't have any more questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Truman, anything further?
Nothing further from the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
Very well. Is there any reason to hold this witness at all?
Not so far as the state's concerned.
Any reason from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, Doctor. You are excused.
Thank you.